Omar, if you could just introduce us to what Ethis is, and how it started, and what you guys offer.
Right. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Ethis started in Singapore quite some time back in 2014. At that time, it was a private investment club. It was a crowdfunding company. That was the intention, but crowdfunding was not yet known at that time. So we called it an investment club. And it was essentially an investment club set up for Islamic finance enthusiasts in Singapore. At that time, I had another previous business which was promoting Islamic finance in Singapore, and a community formed around us. And there were no products, there were no investment opportunities. And prior to that, I was in Indonesia for 6 years, and I have some good relationships. So we came together to invest in some Singapore businesses as well as Indonesian property. And then that evolved in 2016. The demand from the investors was for property investment in Indonesia. And by that time, we had done a few social housing projects. And so those projects we found to be very commercially viable, as well as high impact. And of course, everything Sharia compliant. So three different benefits or advantages were attractive to our community, and it started to grow online. Yeah, so that's how it started.
And so, alhamdulillah, it's this Indonesian legal kind of change and this policy change by the government that seems to be, it sounds to me like it's really created almost this impetus in that kind of whole region in the real estate sector. And like how because I know that a few of your deals have this aspect of the mortgage, Islamic mortgages being actually kind of pre-approved or sped up, so that you've got that kind of exit as well. So do you want to talk a little bit around that so that we can understand?
Sure. So as you rightly pointed out, the driver of this whole program is actually the government. But how the government of Indonesia did it was they incentivized property developers and banks. So property developers were incentivized by shorter, lesser bureaucracy, shorter timeframes for processing and all that. So fast track approval for many things, all the different permits that's required. And for the banks are sort of having a quota that they need to disburse a certain amount of financing to hit the target of 1 million houses a year. So that's what the government did. It was 1 million houses per year program. The government gave some budget to the banks as a subsidy for the conventional and Islamic, home financing or mortgage over a long term. And a key feature of this program is that the home buyer, the family, pays only 1% upfront to own that home. And when you calculate that amount, one house is about $10,000 US dollars, right? So 1% is about $100, and every month they'll pay about $80 or $90 sometimes, depending. And that is typically less than what they pay right now to rent rooms for the whole family. There's a huge shortage of more than 10 million houses. So it's an acute problem, and even now with the COVID, the problem is still there, and people still need homes, and the government still wants the program to run. Yeah, so
that's crazy. Do you reckon this program, like how many houses have been built of that 1 million, and do you think this program is going to continue?
Yeah, the target is 1 million a year, and in the past 2 years consecutively, they reached more than 1 million, and before that, it was in the hundreds of thousands. It started, I believe, in 2015.
Brilliant. And so, Omar, apart from the social housing campaign that the government has introduced in Indonesia, are there other projects as well, or is the kind of primary focus right now driven by this policy change with Ethis Indonesia?
Sure. It's not a policy change; it's a new program, right? And we basically were riding on the program, and it was a win-win for everybody involved. Our best developer clients, we provide, essentially the crowd provides bridging funds to property developers so they can speed up the construction and get paid when the houses are completed, right? So those clients actually came to us, a lot of them came to us from the banks, because the banks want to give the mortgage. They do give some construction financing, but typically not a lot. So they want us to provide this financing as well. So we work closely with the Islamic banks, with the national housing associations. There's a few of them, and alhamdulillah, we're part of that community. But at the same time, right now, as back to your question, there are a number of very interesting projects as well that we're looking at, and we may roll out a few different types in the next 6 months. But right now, the focus is still property. And if you go to our platform right now, there's an open campaign that invests in Islamic boarding schools. This is very interesting. It's been some time since we were in discussions with the government about it. I mean, not directly with the government, with government bodies and other players in the ecosystem. Because in Indonesia, you have tens of thousands of Islamic boarding schools, and in these rural areas, they are something like university towns. So the economy of the people around, in the region, it all revolves around the school. And this school has thousands of students. So alhamdulillah, opportunity came. There was some partial lockdown in Jakarta, and so a bank, an Islamic bank, that was going to give financing to construct another school building for this prominent school. It could not do so because the land office was closed, so they couldn't take the collateral and so on. So then there's a requirement for bridging funds, and that's where we come in with the crowd.
Brilliant.
So it's really that's very interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
That's really interesting. And Omar, the other thing that I wanted to ask you, for people who are investing, particularly from the UK or from abroad, just generally, what's the process? Like, do you want to talk me through? Let's say I want to invest, I don't know, 10,000 into an Ethis project. What's the kind of process from start to finish?
Sure. We've tried to make it as easy as possible, of course. However, it is not, I would say, without any friction points. Yeah, because you're investing, across the world to Indonesia, and there's currently no method or no approach to transfer directly on platform a significant amount to a country like Indonesia from the UK. Yeah. There's no true global payment gateway yet. You hear things like PayPal and so on, they don't work in this way, not for this kind of amounts. So what we've done is that every step of the process we have largely automated. So things like your contracts and so on, all of that is very fluid and very easy. The transfer is where you'll need to do a little bit of work. So if you have good internet banking and you can transfer it online, then you can transfer it directly to the Indonesian account. Or you can use those online remittance companies. And in some countries, people still prefer, some of our investors, especially larger amounts, to go to the bank branch. Of course, right now, everybody has gone online. Yeah. So the process is you go to the platform, you look at the available campaigns, you read the information, you download the PDF if you want to go into more detail. And the sample contract is there. Of course, before all of this, you sign up as a member. Yeah. Then you just submit your interest. It goes into the pledge, and then from there, the steps will just continue. So our team is always there. We realize the easiest way is WhatsApp. A lot of people today just communicate by WhatsApp. It's easier that way, or through chat, on the platform and so on.
Brilliant. Yeah. And then other questions that people might have who have never come across you guys. Let's say have you had any kind of historically any issues with your projects, and how do you deal with that? Because obviously it is a reality that sometimes things like that happen. You have delays. So how does one deal with that as an investor? And also let's say you guys are regulated, of course, which is beneficial for investors. What kind of benefits does that bring as well in terms of protection?
Sure. Maybe I'll start with the second question. So in Indonesia, the process has actually been very, very tedious, to be frank, because what happened was there was a perfect storm brewing about 3 or 4 years ago, where in China, the P2P industry had boomed, to the billions, more than 100 billion. And then the government clamped down and, forced closed a lot of the platforms there. Then at that time, Indonesia just started. So there was a huge spillover or flow of platforms to Indonesia. and suddenly Indonesia has hundreds of platforms. So the government, and some were dodgy or not really proper. Of course, there were good ones as well. So then the government, had this task of ensuring that they regulate the right ones. So that made it very, very tedious. It took a very long time, and for us, it took us more than 2 years because we had first of all they decided to regulate the conventional platforms and Islamic later on. In the meanwhile, they didn't stop us from operating. Right? Finally, when it started, it took about a year. So it's very stringent. Everything and every step of the way, their main concern is investor protection of public monies, right? And of course, they're very, very excited to have foreign investors. And Ethis has been, I think, still today one of the few that has majority of our investors from abroad. Right now, it's like 98%, 97% of the investors are from outside Indonesia. Half are from Singapore, which is where we started. And in the UK, there's a good, small community as well, investing in our campaigns. So yeah, it's great. So regulators are there to make sure that the money flows and the KYC checks and all this other compliance and governance stuff is well handled. And just now you mentioned about problematic projects or defaults, right? I think maybe it's important to highlight that all alternative investments or P2P equity crowdfunding investments are inherently risky because your money is tied to the fate of the business or the project that you're investing in, right? And we found this to be a bit of an educational challenge where we had one period where we reduced the minimum to about $180. Typically it's a few thousand. And because we wanted to just open up access to as many people as possible, a lot of students were saying they want to try to investing, and when they needed the money back, even before any days, when everything's fine, they'll say, "I want to withdraw my money," right? So we'll tell them it's in the project, right? It's very clear in the material, but sometimes they're just excited. So yeah, when your money goes to the project, the benefit of investing in property is that typically you have assets. And or also collateral, and we have the details on our platform. We collect a certain percentage higher than the capital investment and so on. Of course, if in the event that there's a problem, there will be an extended delay. It will take time to recover any kind of assets. Sometimes assets are not too liquid. It takes time. So ideally, it's more of a deterrent and safeguard. But in reality, we have had one case in particular, a significant project that was quite large. And we had to exercise this option or this right on behalf of the investors. So Alhamdulillah, together with the Islamic Bank, with the regional government office, and with the developer who sat down with us, we discussed and then took over the project, right? And the project is ongoing again. But it took a very long time. In this particular case, because it was complicated, the guy was evasive at first. It took about 6 to 9 months to understand what was going on, and another 6 to 9 months to get all the leads and everything done, and then for the project to continue being developed. Yeah. So at the end of the day, you need to have some holding power if you're investing in property, or it's good to diversify and spread out your money into different projects, right? Alhamdulillah, right now we have a larger pool of larger investors, which while we want to be open and so-called democratized access, but typically larger investors have a better understanding of what they're getting themselves into and are more prepared, in cases of delay or default. Just to recap in our approach for property, we have collateral or we have assets, and if we need to, we can try to recover any capital. Yeah,
I think that's really helpful as a as an overview of the downside, because really I think with investment you always have to look at the downside and understand how that's going to play out. And given that it's actually in a way very beneficial that you guys have had a negative experience, and you've had to deal with that and you've learned from that, you've dealt with that successfully, so that I know now as an investor, if I want to put my own personal money and I'm thinking, okay, I want to diversify into different projects, I know that this is illiquid, so I can't get that money out quickly within 6 months or something. It will take time for that project to finish. is relatively high risk in the sense that it is a development project. However, it is property backed, so ultimately, I'm very, very, very unlikely to lose all of my money.
Yep.
And finally, it is giving me a high reward. So, if I'm taking a little bit of that risk, I'm also getting a reward with it, which is, what are your rates at the moment that you offer? Roughly around, if I'm not wrong, around, it's definitely over 12. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'll let you give me the numbers.
It's around there typically. So
Yeah.
if things are on track, everything is timely, then it can go up to 14, 15%. If there's a delay, then the profit typically remains similar or the same. So then because it's spread over a longer period of time, you annualize it, you get about 10 or 9%. Yeah, those are our rates.
And they're strong returns. Brilliant. Omar, I won't take too much of your time. Obviously, this video is part of a broader article. So audiences that are watching this, you should check out the article itself. And also, Ethis, in my experience, I found have been very responsive. So feel free to drop them a line and get them on your WhatsApp, and you can ask them questions there as well. Jazakallah khair, Omar, for all your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.